Good afternoon, everybody. And firstly, can I just apologise for my late arrival and for any disruption that's caused. I'm afraid I fell victim to the strike this morning. I'm going to discuss something that I think is of great importance, which is the safety of enclosed space entry and some recent developments that have occurred in that area. If I ask you just to look at this slide, you'll see I've selected some very brief summaries of fatal accidents that have resulted from enclosed space work. And unfortunately, an all too common occurrence. The question is whether they look familiar. The reason I ask this is because, I started my career in shipping in 1995, and I feel that these same scenarios, these same descriptions could have occurred at basically any time during my career at sea and now ashore, as I'm sure it is the same for many others here. I think you can all agree that it's quite unacceptable that we still see the same problems now, even after 30 years or longer. So the number of fatalities is dreadful, really. The International Bulk Terminals Association submitted a report to the IMO this year, identifying more than 1,000 fatalities have occurred due to enclosed space work. And that doesn't include some of the unreported cases and obviously a larger number of injuries that have occurred from this work or just even near misses. So the IMO's guidelines, the current guidelines, were published in 2011, and obviously time moves on, and like all IMO guidelines, they're kept under review. Obviously, it was felt needed to incorporate some of the new lessons learned and some of the best practices that that companies have should be incorporated into an amendment. And the result of that was the new amended and updated guidelines, which were adopted at the last MSC earlier this year. It's a substantial update to the resolution. I encourage you to read it all, but I've picked some areas that I think are most important and probably require most work from stakeholders. Firstly, there's enclosed space register. This would be a new requirement for a register, a ship-specific register, identifying all the enclosed spaces on board, also highlighting the dangers that could be expected within those spaces. On top of that, it would also show or describe to the crew how to make the space safe for entry. Shipper's declaration. The new guidelines are throughout, they emphasise the need for improved hazard awareness and hazard identification. Now, we know that a lot of the cargoes that are carried introduce a big risk for staff entering the enclosed spaces. So it's very important that the shipper's declaration is accurate and provides the detail that's needed. At the very least, it should be the correct name of the cargo that's being carried, as we often encounter that not being the case. Emergency planning. Again, we see a lot of rescue attempts that go wrong. Rescue attempts that are done on the spur of the moment and subsequently become an injury or fatality also. So I think recognising that, there's now a full new section of the guidelines just devoted to emergency planning, whereas previously the previous version just referred to the need for some. Each entry should have or each space should have a plan for that space, and that should the plan should be shared with the people who are going to go in the space before they do so, which would include any shore workers. Planning, I think you can see from my first slide what can happen when there's no plan or if there's insufficient planning. Again, the majority of accidents that occur in enclosed spaces take place during work that is planned, so the planning isn't good enough. So again, this guidelines, they provide you with lots of advice on how to suitably plan an entry. I think it's fair to say that every entry should be individually planned, risk assessed. This is where the importance of the enclosed space register can only be re-emphasised. It's also important that the enclosed space register will be shared with the shoreside workers as well. It can then, I think, help avoid any unrealistic expectations on the crew on how quickly a space can be made safe for entry and the work carried out within it. We find all too often that unrealistic demands are put on the crew to accomplish tasks quickly that just can't be done, and that's when, again, accidents can occur. Atmosphere testing, again, the new guidelines re-emphasise the need for competent people to conduct atmosphere testing, understand the equipment that's used. It's also important that the testing reflects the hazards that are within the space. Again, this comes back to why it's so important that the shipper's declaration is correct, so that the ship's crew can know what hazard they're testing for, and if need be, buy additional equipment. There is one other part from the atmosphere testing that I'd say is a major change, is they've now introduced a CO2, a carbon dioxide limit of 0.5% that will accompany the standard rules of 20.9% oxygen, etc. And also shore personnel. The figures that I quoted earlier, approximately 1/3 are shore workers. They are often not familiar with ships or enclosed spaces. So it recognises the vulnerability of those workers and asks that they are also adequately briefed. And it provides some examples of basic signage that can be put on board to show that a space is unsafe for entry, for example. So these are some of the more substantial changes. Another area I think is quite big changes in training, which I think is central to safe enclosed space entry. So again, I think we've shown it's a dangerous task, enclosed space entry. I can't think of any other particularly dangerous task where the training is so insufficient often. It's left up to companies, it's not fully detailed. And I think that's recognised in the new guidelines, where the relevant section now covers sort of 12 topic areas, whereas the previous version was 3. I mentioned before there's an increased focus on hazard identification. Again, I can only keep coming back to the new suggestion for an enclosed space register. This will help the person who authorises the tank entry to know what they're looking for. We also would like to think that ship staff are provided with the adequate resources to identify hazards that might be present with certain cargoes. There's also an increased emphasis on theoretical knowledge, such as how quickly an unventilated space will deplete its oxygen, or just the general dangers of carbon dioxide. I think, again, just to emphasise that the training requirements now align much better with the SOLAS, mandatory SOLAS requirements for rescue drills, which should take place every 2 months. This is a good opportunity to have practical experience of the rescue equipment, the plan for rescue, the the atmosphere testing equipment, and the communications equipment. And we really encourage that these are adequately resourced and supported by shore staff to allow the ship staff to get more competent at this task. So basically, what's next? The current IMO guidelines should be revoked at the next IMO assembly, which should take place in November. It's then up to, I think, stakeholders to really try and implement these recommendations where they don't already have them in their own company procedures or rules. We certainly feel that this is now the sort of baseline for enclosed space entry work. It's stuff that we'll look for when we visit ships and when we do any training. I've made the point that our loss prevention is here to help. I can only speak for Britannia, but I'm certain that all P&I loss prevention teams would feel the same. We're always happy to answer any questions or help, provide any guidance we can on this critical task. And finally, I just want to emphasise there's no need to wait. If you have any influence on closed space entry, if you can at all help, it's good to push these recommendations forward. If there's any gaps in procedures, try and fill them with these procedures. Because obviously, it sounds inflated, but every time that we follow these recommendations, we reduce the chances of fatalities and injuries right now. So with that, thank you for your kind attention, and thank you for fitting me in again, and I'll hand back to Apple. Thank you.